She was forced to marry a lowly servant, but what he gave her melted her heart forever. Amara grew up in a large, beautiful house on the edge of a small town. Her family was wealthy, respected, and known for their strict rules. From a young age, she learned that her life was not entirely her own. Every choice, every move, and even her thoughts about marriage were expected to fit the family's plan. Her father, a proud and ambitious man, often spoke about how important it was to maintain status and wealth. Her mother quietly agreed, emphasizing manners, obedience, and the image they must present to the world. Amara loved her home and her family, but she also longed for freedom. She dreamed of seeing new places, meeting people from other towns, and experiencing life in a way that felt natural and unforced. She wanted to love someone freely, someone who would listen to her heart and understand her dreams. But those were only dreams. The reality of her life was different. Her parents had other plans. One evening after dinner, her father called her into his study. The room smelled of polished wood and old books. Heavy curtains blocked the fading sunlight, leaving the space dim but serious. Amara felt a nervous flutter in her chest as she stepped inside. "Amara," her father began, sitting behind his massive desk, "it is time we speak of your future. Your life must be guided wisely. You will be married soon." Amara's stomach sank. She had been expecting this conversation someday, but the weight of his words still shocked her. "Married?" she asked softly, trying to hide the panic rising in her chest. "Yes," he said firmly. "It is necessary for the family, and I have found a suitable match." Amara nodded, though her heart pounded. She tried to imagine who it could be. Surely it would be someone of equal status, someone from a respected family, perhaps a merchant's son or a young gentleman from the town council. But her father's next words crushed all hope. "The man you will marry is Rafik. He is loyal, hardworking, and has served our family faithfully for many years." Amara froze. Rafik, the family servant. A man who polished floors, carried heavy baskets, and answered every command without question. Her mind could not process it immediately. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The idea felt wrong, unfair, almost impossible. How could she be expected to marry someone so far below her status? Her father's gaze was stern, yet calm. "He may not have wealth or a high name, but he has virtues far beyond any title or fortune. He is honest, dependable, and has proven his loyalty. You will learn to appreciate him, and in time you may even find happiness." Amara felt her lips tremble. Happiness. How could she ever feel happiness in a life so tightly controlled, with someone she barely regarded as a man in her eyes? She thought of her dreams, of a future filled with freedom and choice, and suddenly it felt like those dreams had been stolen. The next days were difficult. Amara tried to avoid Rafik, who continued his duties as if nothing had changed. He polished the floors, arranged the gardens, and carried out his tasks with quiet dedication. He did not complain when she ignored him, did not try to win her attention, and did not seem offended by her coldness. He moved around the house with careful steps, always respectful, never intrusive. Amara watched him from a distance. She noticed small details she had never paid attention to before. The careful way he handled the delicate silverware, the way he carried water without spilling a drop, the gentle tone he used when speaking to the younger servants. But instead of feeling admiration, she felt frustration. Why should she be forced to share her life with someone so humble, so ordinary? Her friends and neighbors whispered behind her back, some expressing sympathy, others barely hiding their amusement. They could not understand her family's choice. To them, marrying a servant was almost unthinkable. Amara felt a mix of embarrassment and anger. She began avoiding social gatherings, spending her time in her room, walking alone in the gardens, or sitting quietly by the window, staring at the horizon. Despite her attempts to distance herself, she could not ignore Rafik's presence. He was always there, yet never demanding. He cleaned the house without complaint, helped the younger children with their lessons, and carried out every instruction with patience. Slowly, even though she did not want to admit it, she began to notice his character. There was strength in his quietness, dignity in his humility, and a steady reliability that no one in her social circle could match. Amara's nights were long and filled with worry. She wondered how her life would unfold. She feared the wedding day, imagining the awkwardness, the cold formalities, and the unspoken tension that would fill every room. She questioned her own feelings, battling a storm of resentment, fear, and an unacknowledged curiosity. What kind of man was Rafik, really? What did he think of this arrangement of her? One afternoon, as she wandered through the garden, Rafik appeared carrying a small basket of herbs. "Miss Amara," he said softly, bowing slightly. "These are fresh from the garden. I thought you might like them for your tea." Amara looked at him, startled. She had never seen him offer anything to her personally, and the gesture was so simple yet meaningful. "Thank you," she replied, her voice quieter than usual. She felt a small, unfamiliar warmth in her chest, a hint of recognition that perhaps there was more to him than she had imagined. But she quickly pushed the thought away. She was still angry, still resistant. She reminded herself that this marriage was a trap, a burden she had no choice but to bear. Weeks passed, and the wedding day approached. Amara felt a mix of dread and anxiety. She dressed in the finest garments, her hair perfectly arranged, her family beaming with pride. Rafik, in contrast, wore simple clothes, clean but plain. He approached her with a calm demeanor, his eyes steady and sincere. There was no arrogance, no attempt to impress, only quiet respect. The ceremony itself was brief and formal. Words were spoken, vows exchanged, and in a few moments they were married. Amara felt a strange emptiness as the crowd cheered and her family smiled. She looked at Rafik, expecting indifference, but instead she saw something she had not anticipated: gentleness and patience, a willingness to endure, to give his all without complaint. As they walked home together, Amara's mind was a whirlwind. She did not know what the future held, nor did she feel ready to accept the path she had been forced onto. Yet there was a small, stubborn seed planted within her, a sense that perhaps this man, though humble, could be different from what she had imagined. Perhaps in time she might see the qualities her father had praised. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could find a way to live with him, even to understand him. That night, in the quiet of her room, Amara lay awake. She thought of the life she had dreamed of, the freedom she had hoped for, and the man she had been forced to marry. Her heart was heavy with uncertainty, but somewhere deep inside, a faint curiosity flickered. Who was Rafik, really? What kind of man could touch her heart, even when she had promised herself she would never care? Little did she know this was only the beginning. The days ahead would test her patience, her pride, and her understanding of love. She would face moments of anger, frustration, and doubt. But she would also witness acts of kindness and courage that no wealth or status could buy. And slowly, in ways she could not yet imagine, her heart would begin to see the man behind the servant and the life he could offer her. The days after the wedding were quieter than Amara had expected. She lived in the same house she had always known, yet everything felt different. The presence of Rafik, now officially her husband, changed the rhythm of her daily life. At first, she tried to keep her distance, insisting on her own routines, avoiding conversation, and spending most of her time alone in her room or walking in the gardens. Rafik, however, continued his duties as he had before. He did not demand attention, nor did he complain about her coldness. He treated her with respect, speaking only when necessary and performing every household task with care. He carried himself with quiet dignity, and despite her resistance, Amara could not help but notice his constant patience. She watched him silently one morning as he tended to the garden. His hands worked skillfully, planting flowers, trimming hedges, and arranging the paths with care. He moved with precision as if every step mattered, yet his movements were gentle, not rushed or harsh. There was a sense of pride in his work, but it was quiet, humble, and never boastful. Amara felt a strange mixture of frustration and curiosity. She had married a servant, and yet she could not ignore his competence and dedication. She wanted to look away, to remind herself of her resentment, but instead, she found herself lingering, observing, noticing the details she had previously overlooked. The strength in his arms, the care in his gestures, the sincerity in his eyes, it all seemed so different from the men she had imagined marrying. At mealtimes, she made it a point to sit separately, refusing to share the same table. She thought it would keep the boundaries clear, but Rafik, ever patient, did not protest. He would quietly serve the meals, ensuring everything was prepared to her liking, and then he would step aside, giving her space without complaint. His actions were simple, but they carried a weight she could not deny. A steady, reliable presence that made life feel more orderly, more secure, even if she did not yet want to admit it. One afternoon, Amara's younger brother came running to her room, tears streaming down his face. He had fallen from a tree while playing in the garden and had scraped his knee badly. Amara panicked, unsure of what to do. She called for Rafik. Within moments he appeared, calm and composed, carrying a small first aid kit. "Do not worry, Miss Amara," he said softly, kneeling beside her brother. "It will be all right." His hands were gentle as he cleaned the wound and bandaged it carefully. He spoke to her brother with kindness, making him laugh despite the pain. Amara watched, unable to speak. There was a warmth in Rafik's presence, a natural kindness that seemed effortless. She had never seen anyone act with such care without expecting something in return. Days turned into weeks, and small moments like these began to accumulate. Rafik would remember details about her preferences, how she liked her tea, which books she preferred to read, how she liked to walk in the gardens in the late afternoon. These gestures were quiet and unassuming, yet they slowly began to chip away at the walls she had built around herself. Amara's thoughts were a whirlwind. She hated herself for noticing these things. She hated the small sense of gratitude she felt whenever he helped her or remembered something she had mentioned in passing. She hated the way her heart stirred when he smiled or when his voice was gentle. She told herself repeatedly that she could not allow herself to feel anything but resentment. She reminded herself that she was a wealthy woman and he was a servant. That was the reality she had to accept. But life has a way of testing even the strongest resolve. One evening, a cold wind blew through the town, bringing with it a sudden rainstorm. Amara had been walking in the garden when the rain began, and she found herself stranded on the far side of the property. She tried to run back to the house, but the ground was slippery, and she stumbled, soaking her clothes. Fear and frustration welled up inside her. Rafik appeared almost immediately, as if he had been watching over the grounds. Without hesitation, he extended his hand to help her up and guided her safely back to the house. He carried her soaked belongings and ensured she reached her room without slipping again. Amara's heart raced, not just from the cold and the rain, but from the unexpected care he showed. "I could have managed," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, though her teeth chattered from the cold. "You could have, Miss Amara," Rafik replied softly, "but it is safer this way. I could not let you risk yourself." There was no arrogance in his tone, no suggestion that he had done something extraordinary. It was simply a matter of care, of responsibility, of concern for her well-being. That night, as Amara dried her clothes and warmed herself by the fire, she could not stop thinking about his actions. He had not demanded gratitude or praise. He had only acted silently, with patience and respect. Amara's family noticed the subtle changes in her behavior. She was still reserved, still distant at times, but there were moments when her eyes softened, when her voice was less sharp, when a faint smile appeared without her realizing it. Her parents were puzzled, not understanding what was causing the shift, but they were pleased that she was less tense. Rafik, meanwhile, continued his work without expectation. He helped around the house, assisted with the children, and performed every task with care. He never overstepped boundaries, never tried to impress her, and never complained about the life he had been given. There was an honesty and integrity in his actions that was undeniable. Amara found herself in a strange position. She had resisted him, judged him, and held onto resentment, yet she could not ignore the truth. He was dependable, kind, and thoughtful. He saw her as a person, not as a wealthy girl to be managed or controlled. And slowly, almost without her realizing it, she began to feel something new: respect. A small flicker of understanding, perhaps in time even admiration. One afternoon, Amara was reading in her room when Rafik entered with a small tray of tea. "Miss Amara, I thought you might like this," he said quietly, setting it beside her. She looked up, startled. She had been lost in thought, imagining a life far away from this house, far away from this man. Yet here he was, offering something simple, something considerate. She felt a small warmth spread through her chest. She forced herself to look away, reminding herself that she could not allow attachment, that she must remain distant and guarded. But the seed had been planted. Each small act, each quiet gesture, was slowly building a foundation that Amara could not see yet, but that would shape the days to come. She began to notice the details she had previously dismissed: the care and the way he spoke to her younger brother, the patience he showed with the servants, the thoughtfulness in his quiet attention to the household. Her feelings were confusing. She felt frustration at herself for being affected by such a humble man. She felt fear at the thought that she might grow to care for him. And yet there was an undeniable truth forming in her heart. Rafik was a man of character, a man of quiet strength, and a man who, without demanding anything, had already begun to change her world. The early days of marriage, which Amara had expected to be full of tension and bitterness, were instead filled with small, unexpected moments. Moments that, while simple, carried weight. The kindness in a gesture, the steadiness in a presence, the thoughtfulness in action, these were the things that began to shift her perception, little by little. By the end of the second week, Amara could not deny it entirely. She respected him, even if she refused to admit it aloud. She saw the depth of his character, the integrity of his actions, and the sincerity in his eyes. And while her heart remained guarded, she could not ignore the subtle changes stirring within her. A curiosity about the man she had been forced to marry. A recognition of the humanity and goodness that no wealth or status could ever replace. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, and though her pride and fears would challenge her at every turn, the quiet foundation of understanding and respect was beginning to form. In the ordinary, everyday moments of life, Amara was learning that love, trust, and admiration could grow in unexpected ways, even in the most unlikely circumstances. And that knowledge, though small and tentative, would guide the path of her heart in the days to come. The days passed quietly, but a sense of tension still lingered between Amara and Rafik. She no longer outright avoided him, but she remained distant, her heart wrapped in layers of pride, fear, and uncertainty. Still, Rafik's patience never wavered. He moved through the house as always, quiet, careful, respectful, and his small acts of kindness began to leave impressions on her, even if she refused to admit it to herself. One evening, a storm approached the town. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, and heavy winds shook the trees in the garden. Rain began to fall in thick sheets, drenching the earth and making the paths slippery. Amara had gone out to check on the flowers she loved, despite the weather, and soon realized she had been caught far from the house. Her skirts were soaked and her shoes squelched in the mud. Panic rose in her chest. She was alone, and the house was too far away to reach without slipping or falling. She tried to run, but the slippery ground betrayed her. She stumbled, her hands clawing at the wet grass as she tried to steady herself. The wind whipped around her, rain stinging her face, and for the first time in a long while she felt real fear. Suddenly she heard footsteps behind her. A hand reached out and grabbed hers, steadying her. She looked up and saw Rafik standing there, his own clothes damp from the rain, his expression calm and focused. "Miss Amara, you mustn't risk yourself like this," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Come, let me guide you back." Amara was too surprised to speak. She had not expected him to be near, let alone to act so quickly and without hesitation. His hand was steady in hers, strong but careful, guiding her step by step along the slippery path. He carried her basket of herbs, now soaked, without complaint. She noticed how carefully he avoided puddles, how he kept his steps deliberate and cautious to ensure her safety. When they finally reached the house, she was shivering and exhausted. Rafik quickly wrapped a warm blanket around her shoulders and led her to the fire. "Sit here and warm yourself," he said, his eyes full of concern. He left the room briefly and returned with a cup of hot tea, placing it gently in her hands. "This will help," he said softly. Amara held the cup, her hands trembling slightly from the cold and from something deeper she could not name. She felt a warmth not just from the tea, but from the care and attention in every small action he had taken. She tried to speak, to thank him, but her voice caught in her throat. Words seemed inadequate to express what she felt. Rafik sat quietly nearby, not pushing for conversation, simply allowing her to gather herself. He did not demand gratitude or admiration, nor did he try to impress her. He acted out of simple, unassuming kindness. And in that moment, Amara felt a strange, unfamiliar feeling, a fluttering in her heart, a mix of gratitude, relief, and something like admiration. Later that night, as the storm raged outside, Amara lay in her room, thinking about Rafik. She could not stop replaying his actions in her mind. Every step he had taken, every gesture of care spoke volumes about the man he was. He had acted with no expectation of reward, no desire for praise. He had only wanted to ensure her safety and comfort. She realized reluctantly that she had underestimated him. All this time, she had judged him solely on his position as a servant, his lack of wealth and status. But in reality, his character, his integrity, and his selfless care were qualities far more valuable than any riches or titles. The next morning, Amara found herself watching him again as he moved about the house. He was quietly fixing a broken fence, his hands steady despite the wet weather from the night before. She noticed the determination in his eyes, the careful thought in each movement. She realized that this was not just diligence or obedience. It was pride in doing what was right, pride in caring for the people and home he had been trusted with. Her heart, which she had tried so hard to shield, began to soften. She felt a small spark of admiration, a recognition that Rafik was a man of rare character. She still struggled with her feelings, knowing that pride and past resentment would not disappear overnight, but the seed had been planted. Something in her was beginning to change. Days turned into weeks, and Amara found herself noticing more small gestures that Rafik performed without expecting anything in return. He would prepare her favorite tea exactly the way she liked it, quietly sweep the floors while she read in her room, or bring fresh flowers from the garden without a word. Each act was simple, almost invisible, yet each left an impression on her heart. One afternoon, she had a minor accident while carrying water from the well. She slipped and nearly fell, but Rafik was there again, steadying her before she could hurt herself. He helped her to a nearby bench, checked to see if she was hurt, and waited patiently while she composed herself. "You must be more careful," he said softly. "I cannot always be there to catch you." Amara felt a blush rise to her cheeks. She had been stubborn, proud, and distant, yet here was this man, repeatedly showing her care and concern without complaint. She wanted to tell him to stop, to leave her pride intact, but she could not. She felt a warmth in her chest that was difficult to ignore. Then one evening, something happened that would forever change her perception. Rafik entered her room with a small wooden box, carefully carved with simple patterns. He placed it gently on her desk. "I thought you might like this," he said quietly. Amara opened the box and found a small, delicate locket inside. She ran her fingers over the intricate carvings, feeling the smooth wood and the care that had gone into creating it. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice catching in her throat. "It is for you," Rafik said softly, "to keep you safe so that even when I am not around, you are protected." Amara looked up at him, surprised by the depth of thought and care behind such a simple gift. She felt something unfamiliar stirring inside her. A combination of gratitude, admiration, and a growing warmth toward the man she had been forced to marry. Her heart, which had been hardened by resentment and pride, began to soften. That night she held the locket close, thinking about Rafik's actions over the past weeks. She realized that he had not sought to win her love or affection, nor had he acted out of duty alone. He had acted out of genuine care, out of kindness that asked for nothing in return. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Amara's heart began to change. She began to notice other small things about him as well, the patience in his voice, the gentleness in his eyes, the quiet strength in his presence. She realized that he had been consistent, reliable, and thoughtful in every action he took. He had not rushed her feelings or demanded her attention. Instead, he had allowed his character to speak for itself, letting her see the man behind the servant. Amara could no longer ignore the truth. She was beginning to care. She was beginning to see Rafik not just as a servant, but as a man of integrity, kindness, and depth. The walls she had built around her heart were slowly crumbling, brick by brick, under the weight of his consistent, selfless care. Even as she struggled with her pride and past resentment, she could feel a shift within herself. She began to look forward to small moments with him, noticing the thoughtfulness in his gestures and the warmth in his eyes. She realized that love was not about wealth, status, or appearances. It was about sincerity, care, and the willingness to be there for someone without expecting anything in return. And in that realization, a small spark of hope ignited within her. Perhaps this marriage, which she had feared and resisted, could be more than a duty or an obligation. Perhaps, through patience, understanding, and the steady kindness of a humble man, her heart could truly begin to open. The days after the gift of the locket were different. Amara found herself watching Rafik not with judgment, but with curiosity and admiration. She began to notice the care in every action he took, the thoughtfulness in his words, and the patience that guided every movement. And though she still carried the weight of her past pride and fear, she could feel the first real stirrings of trust, respect, and even affection taking root in her heart. For the first time, Amara realized that love could grow in the smallest moments, in the quiet gestures, in the acts of kindness that asked for nothing in return. And in that quiet, steady presence, she began to understand that Rafik, the humble servant, had given her something far more valuable than wealth, status, or titles. He had given her the first glimpse of true, unselfish love. After the storm and the gift of the wooden locket, the atmosphere in Amara's household began to change. It was subtle at first, almost invisible to anyone outside the house. Yet inside, in the quiet corners of the garden and the soft light of her room, a new understanding had begun to form between Amara and Rafik. Amara found herself thinking about him more often. Not in the way she had dreaded, she did not yet call it affection, but she noticed his presence in ways she had never allowed herself to see before. She watched him quietly as he went about his work, repairing fences, tending the garden, or simply moving through the house with the steady, calm confidence that had begun to draw her attention. The locket, small and simple, hung around her neck like a reminder of that night. Every time she touched it, she thought of Rafik's gentle care, his thoughtfulness, and the unwavering patience he had shown her. It was not just a gift. It was a symbol of the man he was, a man who acted without expectation, who showed kindness in ways that were pure and sincere. As days turned into weeks, Amara began to notice more of the small things he did. He would wake early to light the fireplaces, ensuring the house was warm before she got out of bed. He prepared meals with care, always remembering her favorite dishes and the way she liked them cooked. He would help the children with their studies, quietly correcting mistakes without a hint of impatience. And when she walked through the garden, he was there to offer assistance if needed, yet never intruded or demanded attention. Amara's pride was still there, strong and resistant. She reminded herself constantly that she could not afford to be impressed by a man with no wealth, no title, no social standing. Yet the more she saw his actions, the harder it became to dismiss the admiration stirring within her. She began to understand that character mattered more than status, kindness mattered more than wealth, and sincerity mattered more than appearances. One morning, as she sat in the garden sketching the flowers, Rafik appeared with a basket of freshly picked herbs. "Miss Amara," he said softly, bowing slightly, "I thought you might like these." Amara looked up, surprised again by his attentiveness. She smiled faintly, feeling a warmth in her chest she could not deny. "Thank you," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "They're very beautiful." He placed them beside her without a word and walked away, giving her space. There was no boastfulness in his actions, no need for praise, only quiet thoughtfulness. And as she returned to her sketching, she realized she had been watching him more than she had noticed. She admired the ease with which he moved, the care in his gestures, and the patience in his every word. In the evenings, she began to stay awake longer, thinking about the day, reflecting on the little moments that had made her life more bearable, more comfortable, more thoughtful. She could not deny it. Rafik's presence was changing her, softening her heart in ways she had never imagined. She began to recognize that he was not just a servant performing his duties, but a man of integrity and kindness, a man whose loyalty and care ran deeper than most she had ever met. One day, the household faced a minor crisis. A storm had damaged part of the roof, and the rain was leaking into one of the children's rooms. Amara's parents were away on business, and she felt panic rising in her chest. She rushed to the room, trying to contain the water with blankets, but the situation was beyond her ability to manage. Rafik arrived promptly, assessing the damage with calm efficiency. "Miss Amara, I will fix this," he said, "and ensure the children are safe." Amara watched him as he climbed the ladder to repair the roof, working steadily despite the rain. His focus, patience, and skill were impressive, and she felt a mixture of admiration and relief. For the first time, she realized that he was more capable than she had ever imagined. And it was not just skill. It was the care he took to ensure everyone's well-being, the thoughtfulness in every action that touched her deeply. After the repairs, he helped move the children to a dry room, making sure they were warm and comfortable. Amara could not help but notice the gentle tone in which he spoke, the patience in his guidance, and the calm assurance he offered. He never sought recognition or reward. He acted out of genuine concern. That night, as Amara lay in bed, she reflected on the day. She thought about the ways Rafik had quietly taken responsibility, how he had acted without complaint, and how he had placed the needs of others above his own. She realized that true strength was not shown through wealth or status, but through patience, kindness, and selfless care. And slowly, she began to understand that these were the qualities that mattered most in a person, qualities that could not be bought or demanded. They had to be earned through character. Over time, their interactions became more natural. Amara began to speak to him more, asking his opinion on household matters or seeking his advice on small decisions. He responded with patience and respect, never dismissing her thoughts or undermining her authority. She noticed that she could trust him completely, that he would never deceive, mislead, or take advantage of her. One evening, as they walked through the garden together, she noticed the soft glow of the sunset reflecting on his face. For the first time, she looked at him not as a servant, but as a man, strong, kind, patient, and trustworthy. Her heart, long guarded by pride and resentment, began to soften further. She felt a sense of peace in his presence, a calm reassurance that she had never experienced before. Amara realized that she was beginning to care for him deeply. She admired his character, respected his patience, and valued his presence in her life. It was not yet love in the passionate sense she had dreamed of, but it was something stronger than mere attraction. It was a recognition of the goodness in him, a trust in his sincerity, and a warmth that made her feel safe and valued. One morning, she found herself laughing genuinely at something he said while helping her tend the garden. The sound surprised her. It had been so long since she had felt such ease and happiness. Rafik smiled quietly, pleased by the sound, yet he did not draw attention to it. His contentment was simple, unobtrusive, and sincere. Amara began to notice other small details as well. The way he remembered her favorite flowers, the way he spoke to the children, the way he anticipated her needs without being asked. Each action built a picture of a man whose heart was generous, whose mind was steady, and whose intentions were pure. She realized that love could grow quietly, slowly, and persistently, not always in grand gestures or dramatic events, but in the consistency of daily care, the reliability of thoughtful actions, and the patience of someone who truly sees you. The locket around her neck reminded her constantly of the moment her heart had first begun to open. She realized that it was not just a piece of wood or a simple gift. It was a symbol of the trust, thoughtfulness, and patience that Rafik had shown her from the very beginning. And slowly she began to understand that these qualities mattered far more than wealth, social standing, or beauty. They were the foundation of real love. As weeks turned into months, Amara's feelings grew stronger. She no longer felt resentment or shame about her marriage. Instead, she began to value Rafik's presence in her life, to admire his character, and to recognize the depth of his care. She found herself sharing small thoughts and stories with him, seeking his advice and appreciating his quiet, steadfast support. One evening, as they sat together in the garden under a sky painted with stars, Amara realized that she had come to trust him completely. She felt a deep sense of peace in his presence, a comfort that she had never known before. And as she looked at him, she saw not a servant, but a man whose heart was kind, whose intentions were pure, and whose love, though unspoken, had begun to fill the empty spaces in her own heart. In that quiet moment, Amara understood that love could grow in the smallest acts of care, in the patience and thoughtfulness shown day after day, and in the trust built over time. She realized that Rafik, the humble man she had once dismissed, had given her something far more valuable than wealth or status. He had given her the first glimpse of true, enduring love. And in that realization, Amara's heart opened wider than she had ever imagined possible. She began to hope, to dream, and to believe that a life filled with love, trust, and respect was not only possible but waiting for her, right here, with the man who had quietly, patiently, and lovingly earned her heart. By now, Amara's life had begun to change in ways she could hardly have imagined. The anger and resentment she had felt at the start of her marriage had been replaced, slowly and quietly, by something much deeper. It was not just curiosity or admiration anymore. Her heart was beginning to open fully to the man she had once dismissed, Rafik. It began in small, quiet moments. She found herself seeking his presence, not because she had to, but because being near him made her feel calm, understood, and cared for. She noticed how he listened to her with patience, never interrupting or judging, how he remembered the little details about her life, and how he always seemed to know exactly what she needed before she even asked. It was as if he understood her in ways no one else ever had. One evening, Amara was walking through the garden, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Rafik joined her, carrying a small basket of freshly picked flowers. He did not speak at first, simply walking beside her, matching her pace. She felt a warmth in her chest she could not explain, a quiet joy at the simple act of being together. "Miss Amara," he said finally, his voice gentle, "I thought you might like these flowers for your room." She looked at the colorful blooms, then up at him. For the first time, she did not hesitate. She smiled, a real, heartfelt smile. "Thank you, Rafik," she said softly. "They're beautiful, just like you always say." He smiled back quietly, without pride or arrogance. That was one of the things she loved most about him. He never sought praise, never demanded attention, never boasted of his deeds. His contentment was in simply helping, simply being there, and simply caring. And in that moment, Amara realized that she had come to care for him deeply, more deeply than she had ever expected. The transformation of her feelings had been gradual, almost imperceptible at first, but now she could not deny it. She admired him, trusted him, and cherished every moment they spent together. She thought of his patience, his kindness, his unwavering respect, and she felt a surge of gratitude and love. One day, the family faced another small crisis. A neighboring tree had fallen during a storm, blocking the main path to the house. The workers were unable to move it quickly, and Amara grew anxious about how it would affect the household and the children. But Rafik approached the problem with calm efficiency. He organized the work, lifted heavy branches himself, and guided others with quiet authority. Watching him in action, Amara felt awe and admiration. He did not complain, he did not rush, and he never sought recognition. He simply acted with determination and care. After the tree was cleared, Rafik helped Amara carry the children back inside safely. She noticed how gently he handled them, how patiently he reassured them when they were scared, and how completely he took responsibility without being asked. She realized then that his heart was as strong as it was kind, and that his love, though quiet, was unwavering. The more she saw him, the more Amara's heart melted. She began to understand that love was not about grand gestures or dramatic events. It was about consistency, patience, and selfless care. It was about seeing someone's character and trusting that it was steady, true, and unwavering. Rafik had given her this love every day, in ways so simple they almost went unnoticed, and yet the effect on her heart was profound. One evening, as the sun set and the house grew quiet, Amara found herself alone with Rafik in the garden. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time without any judgment or pride. She saw a man whose strength came from patience, whose courage came from care, whose love came from a heart that asked for nothing but the happiness of those around him. "Rafik," she said softly, her voice trembling, I have been wrong. I judged you at first because of your position, because of your status. But now I see the man you are. You have shown me patience, kindness, and care in ways I never thought possible. And I am grateful, more than I can say." Rafik looked at her, his eyes gentle, his expression calm. "Miss Amara, you have nothing to apologize for. You have been honest, and that is all I could ever ask for. My care for you has never been about obligation. It has always been about wanting the best for you, even if you could not see it yet." Amara felt tears fill her eyes. She realized that her heart had completely changed. The fear, the pride, the resentment, they were gone. In their place was trust, admiration, and a love that was growing stronger every day. She stepped closer to him, her hand reaching for his. "Rafik, I care for you. I think I have loved you for some time, and I did not even know it." Rafik's eyes softened, and he took her hand gently in his. "And I have loved you, Miss Amara," he said quietly. "From the very first day, in every small act, I have loved you. It has always been you I wished to care for, to protect, to make happy." Amara felt a wave of emotion sweep over her. She had been forced into this marriage, expecting only hardship and disappointment, yet she had found something far more valuable than she could have imagined. She had found a man whose heart was true, whose love was selfless, and whose presence made her life richer, warmer, and more meaningful than she had ever dreamed. The following days were filled with a new closeness between them. Amara no longer avoided Rafik or kept him at a distance. She shared her thoughts, her dreams, and her fears with him. He listened, always patient, always kind, offering guidance only when needed, and always respecting her voice and her choices. They spent hours walking together in the gardens, talking quietly about the world, the children, and their hopes for the future. Amara laughed freely in his presence, a sound that had been absent for so long. She began to notice the smallest things, the way he tilted his head when he listened, the warmth in his smile, the strength in his hands, and with every observation her heart grew fuller. One evening, Rafik brought her another small gift, a wooden box containing a delicate hand-carved figurine of two birds sitting side by side. "I thought you might like this," he said softly. "It reminds me of how we walk through life together, side by side, no matter the storms we face." Amara held the figurine, her eyes filling with tears. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Just like you." Rafik smiled, his hand brushing hers gently. "It is us," he said simply. "Quiet, steady, and together." At that moment, Amara realized something profound. Love did not have to be loud or dramatic. It could be quiet, patient, consistent, and selfless. And in that love, her heart had finally found a home. The days turned into months, and their bond grew stronger. They worked together in the household, cared for the children, and supported each other in every task and challenge. Amara no longer felt the weight of pride or fear. Instead, she felt gratitude, joy, and a love that deepened with each passing day. She thought back to the day she had first met Rafik as her husband, a man she had judged so quickly and harshly. She could hardly believe how far they had come. From fear and resentment to trust, respect, and finally love, their journey had been slow but certain. And in the end, Amara realized that the life she had been forced into had given her something far more precious than freedom alone. It had given her the love of a man whose heart was pure and whose care was endless. One quiet evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in golden light, Amara and Rafik stood together in the garden, holding hands. The locket around her neck gleamed softly, a reminder of the moment her heart had first begun to open. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not a servant, not a man of humble status, but the partner she had always needed, the companion who had quietly, patiently, and lovingly earned her heart. "I love you, Rafik," she said softly, her voice full of emotion. "And I love you, Amara," he replied, his eyes shining with sincerity. "Forever." In that moment, the walls of pride, fear, and resentment fell completely away. Her heart had melted, fully and irrevocably, in the warmth of his care, the steadiness of his presence, and the selfless love he had given her every day. She realized that true love was not about wealth, status, or appearance. It was about trust, patience, kindness, and the willingness to care for someone completely and unconditionally. And so, Amara's life, which had begun with fear and reluctance, ended with joy, gratitude, and love. The humble servant who had been forced into her life had given her the greatest gift she could ever receive, a heart that had learned to love freely, deeply, and forever.